And for more on this, I'm joined by journalist and political contributor David Seaman from our New York studio. Welcome, David. So first, want to get your reaction as a journalist to the campaign coverage we've been seeing.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on and covering this. I haven't seen anything like this before, where one candidate is pretty much given a free pass. And I'm talking about Mitt Romney, of course. A story will come out about him or his financial ties, and it just basically disappears the next day, goes no further than the blogosphere. And then on the other hand, as you were saying in the last piece, Ron Paul and even Governor Buddy Roemer, who's also running for president, are not getting much coverage, and when they do, it tends to be negative.
And so we just took a look at mainstream media, this trend of literally embedding their reporters with candidates. How do you think this practice and other journalism practices affects campaign coverage?
So when you embed a journalist in a war zone, for example, that has some very legitimate journalistic uses because you have somebody on the ground with a camera who can speak to soldiers and all that. But when you have embedded reporters who are on the campaign trail and have, sort of an unspoken allegiance to a certain candidate, that's very dangerous because you have a reporter who's acting more like a PR person than an actual journalist, because they know if they dig a little too deep or dig a little too hard, that they can be thrown off that campaign bus. They can stop being invited to these press conferences where there's limited space. And I don't like a lot of the embedded reporting that we've seen so far in the GOP primary.
And this type of reporting, most of the time, it's hard to avoid. Inevitably, this will lead to bias reporting. How do you think campaign coverage can affect the outcome of elections?
It has a tremendous effect. The average person, all the information about these candidates is out there. It's online. But the average person has such a busy life right now, and they're so worried about paying their mortgage and doing all these other things that they have to do, that really they just turn on the TV for a few minutes at night, and that's where their opinions are coming from. And so when they see that Mitt Romney is a strong leader and is going to turn this country around, and when they see that Ron Paul has bad foreign policy views, that's really all they hear, and they don't hear the other side, which is that isn't necessarily the truth at all. And also, in the campaign debates, the questions they're throwing to these candidates are not the most controversial issues in the country right now. They're not asking them about SOPA and Protect IP Act, which were fascist internet censorship bills that Congress tried to push through. They're not asking them about NDAA, which the National Defense Authorization Act, President Obama signed it into law a little more than a month ago, and it gives him powers that are much closer to the powers that a dictator or an emperor would have, and they're not asking these candidates what they think of that, and it's a big deal.
And I know that you are a very outspoken critic of the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, a law that President Obama recently signed off on. I mean, why haven't we seen much coverage of this? There has been many opportunities to discuss this. So many of these GOP debates have gone on, yet very little time has been dedicated to discussing this topic.
Absolutely. It's really surprising. I mean, as a journalist, it's kind of interesting to see them ignoring this topic and skirting the issue. But as an American citizen, it's really terrifying. It's not interesting to see them not talking about the fact that a lot of our civil rights have been signed away, and it's being dismissed as not a big deal.
Well, what do you think is behind it, this kind of selective picking and choosing of what's important, what's not important, what to cover, what not to cover, when something like the NDAA affects every citizen and has huge implications for our freedoms? Why are we seeing certain types of stories covered and others overlooked?
Well, this is just my opinion, but the NDAA is a very treasonous piece of legislation. It's perhaps one of the most dangerous laws we've ever signed into law in the United States. And I think the media knows that if this got out there and, all 308 million Americans knew about it, there would be such outrage that pretty much everyone in Congress would have to go. They would have to be replaced. And I think there's that fear there. And the other problem is we don't really have a wide variety of media options. 90% of radio and television networks in the United States right now are owned by only a handful of companies. And many of those companies have the same advertisers that they need to please. And they also don't want to upset politicians, because if you upset a politician who voted for NDAA, they may not come back on your show. And if you can't get good guests, you can't maintain good ratings, and you are out, basically, you know?
That's an interesting point that you make. So what is your suggestion then to a voter that wants to be informed, truly informed about all the issues, what's really going on? How does one go about doing that?
Sure. Other than watching RT America, you need to get on Twitter and just do some searches on there. Search for the candidates you're interested in and see the real-time conversation that's developing. Use Google News. Search for every candidate. Search for Ron Paul. Search for Governor Buddy Roemer. Don't limit your coverage and don't limit your searches to just, Mitt Romney, because you probably already know about Mitt Romney. It's time for you to learn about these other people who are also running for president and also have a lot of experience.
David, thank you very much for weighing in. That was journalist and political contributor David Seaman.
Thank you.